On July 31st, 1988, 25,688 passionate wrestling fans packed the now demolished Milwaukee County Stadium to witness a 15 match card featuring some stars of the future, some stars of the past, and some stars that honest to God were well past their prime by this point. But Vince McMahon had a goddamn stranglehold on the professional wrestling business. Jim Crockett Promotions was about to be bought out by Ted Turner. The AWA was a wasteland. Memphis existed, and World Class was on its last leg. And I'm not talking about Kerry Von Erich post-motorcycle accident. But one thing about cards like this is when you look at it number of years later, well, it didn't always used to be better, folks. I'm John Renton with the Retro Review of WWF WrestleFest 1988. I'm going to title it WWE WrestleFest to just avoid the pandas coming after me. But yes, this is when they were WWF, and this is when they were rocking and rolling, strutting and strolling. Not just talking about Honky Tonk Man, not just talking about the Killer Bees and their extra weight and... Oh boy. So I'm really glad that the WWE Vault channel and the WCW channel exist because I'm getting to see events that I either was not able to see except on Coliseum Home Video. If you know what Coliseum Home Video is, you are around my age. If you don't, you are probably too young to watch this particular video. Or at least understand the concept of Coliseum Home Video. Because, and I'm going to go over some factoids and not really provide a ton of match analysis because realistically 15 matches and the timestamps, or at least the time for this particular event is just under 3 hours. So there are a few matches that go long, but there are a few matches. I kind of miss a lot of cards like this where they had matches that went sub 7 minutes. But sub 7 minute matches imply the existence of Dom 7 minute matches. You're welcome. And I'm not just talking about Demolition in their S&M gear. So, basically, in the lead up to WrestleMania, Vince McMahon, the dirty pervert that he has been exposed to be, was basically trying to just push to WrestleMania. He was running 3 to 4 shows a night, doing a lot of stuff on cash flow, earning a lot of money, but they were spending a whole lot of money. They had the SNL stuff, all that stuff that they were building towards WrestleMania 1 with, and they were so strapped for cash. With Black Saturday not exactly paying off all that much, Black Saturday, when Vince McMahon on the USA Network also got on WTBS, which kicked Georgia Championship Wrestling off the goddamn deal. The Briscoes made their deal. It's a whole lot of stuff that I could go into, but I've gone into like on Dark Side of the Ring and other things. And there's YouTube shoot interviews and a whole bunch of stuff out there. But basically the idea is that Vince McMahon had, 2 shows on 2 big cable networks. And really, those were the 2 big cable networks. And WTBS actually was in more homes than USA Network at that point. I still think it's the case, or it's about even now. But Ted Turner making WTBS was a big deal. Making it into a superstation. So, essentially, because the ratings were dying and Vince was not honoring the deal, he was mostly showing arena matches and doing stuff like just basically using it as a way to promote his live events instead of actually using it, with the Georgia studio TV setup. He wasn't really doing all that much. Even though Freddie Miller, I think that was the announcer's name, welcomed us and all this stuff going on, going through a whole lot of things. By the time they got to, later 84, early 85, it was very obvious that Ted Turner wanted to get out of the deal, which was a handshake, according to Vince McMahon, again, the dirty pervert, that Turner was going to kick him off the air. He made a deal with Jim Crockett Promotions for $1 million. And $1 million, along with Antonio Inoki, the New Japan Pro Wrestling president and noted crazy man that was investing a lot of money in some bullshit biotech stuff in Brazil. Look that one up, folks. He paid him $1 million for a booking fee. So right around the time they were gonna maybe possibly sell all the video rights just for $100,000 just to push them to WrestleMania, they get the $1 million from Crockett, they get the $1 million from Inoki, and that pushes them to WrestleMania, and then onwards and upwards and all that stuff. WrestleMania 2, 3 locations was a little bit ridiculous. 3 was the 78,000. It was not 93,173. I refuse to fucking believe that. There's a lot of fucking people. And then you had WrestleMania 4, which saw Savage win the WWF Championship, and Hogan had to be in his lording over him and stuff like that. And I understand they were trying to build a story, but really, the way they did it, Hogan just couldn't stand being out of the spotlight after being the champion for 4 years and 2 weeks. Only Bruno got a longer run. Well, Backlund also got a longer run. Backlund's run, to be perfectly honest, probably shouldn't have been nearly 6 years. And I love Bob Backlund, don't get me wrong, and Mr. Backlund was a great heel. But that basically leads us to events like this. Now, they were holding shows in stadiums before. I don't remember what the arena was for the big event where Orndorff and Hogan had like 67,000 people in Toronto. And that was the precursor and the inspiration to have WrestleMania 3 in Detroit, where you have a bunch of people, the Detroit-Toronto pipeline, not just for wrestling, but for wrestling fans. I mean, 2 mecca cities as far as North American professional wrestling. Toronto wrestling history is insane. Detroit wrestling history is insane. Both the rise and the inevitable fall because the Sheik just couldn't get out of the way. The original Sheik, not, Iran #1 Sheik. But with events like this, they were still packing, or at least, shooting stadiums pretty well. Now, this was also during the period where NWA, what would become WCW, was running the Great American Bash Tour. And July 31st, 88, Jim Cornette talked about this on his Experience and Drive-Thru and various podcast episodes, because him and the Midnight Express were taking on the Fantastics on this tour, and they were also going to go into the feud with Tully and Arn. Whole point, they were running big arenas. They were also running some big stadiums. And so big stadiums were, kind of the norm. Now, AWA wasn't running any goddamn stadiums, and Texas Stadium had happened for World Class. Again, they had like 7,500 people. And Texas Stadium, look it up, folks, had way more seats than 7,000. But essentially, with events like this, and I'm finally going to get to it, we have Milwaukee County Stadium, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 53,192 capacity, according to articles you can find, and they had 25,866 fans. I'm sorry, I misspoke, but whatever. It could have ended up being 688 fans. But the whole thing about it is that shows like this did display just how much power WWF television had, how much power their roster had, and it was a big goddamn deal. Now, I am going to take shots at certain people that are still alive and that are dead. And I want to also say, before I fully dive into this, that if you guys have any problem with me taking shots at Ultimate Warrior, at Hulk Hogan, I do not care. Because you can recognize how beneficial they were to the company, how, huge they were as far as stars, as far as just the amount of, money that they drew. Ultimate Warrior for a shorter time period, but a big goddamn supernova. He was a big deal, especially kids like me, and then you find out all the shit that he said. And Hogan drew a fortune. I stand by everything I said in the tribute. I stand by everything I said on the SmackDown episode where they tributed Hogan. I stand by everything I said for the TMC Presents the Real Hulk Hogan review. I stand by everything I said. Because the man that played Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, was a goddamn scumbag. And I have no problem saying that. And if you think that defending racism is cool, you're not a good person. You're not a good fucking person at all. And some of y'all, especially on Twitter, need to learn to fucking spell if you're going to try to come at people. Because I've seen people defending Hogan, and they can't spell for shit. Stop getting blown by one of your inbred, people that you're with, and try to actually get out there and go outside of your family tree. So, yeah, that's basically just about it right there. We have Sean Mooney. Who? Sean Mooney being the best commentator on the show, and I like Sean Mooney. Do not misunderstand me. Sean Mooney was a great host. Sean Mooney was a decent commentator. He was a pretty good backstage announcer, or backstage interviewer, and is doing work for the NWA. And Sean Mooney had a podcast. I think the podcast actually came back. I've listened to some clips, listened to a couple episodes. Pretty good, pretty gracious. Seems like a pretty nice guy. Understands wrestling. And wasn't in wrestling, like mainstream wrestling, for a huge amount of time. But he was in during a big boom period, and he got to see a whole lot of stuff. And Sean Mooney was a pretty good commentator here. Actually, he was the best, but unfortunately, that's because everybody else was fucking terrible. Lord Alfred Hayes, who, by the way, was a fucking goddamn dirty pervert and an idiot himself, and yeah, promotional consideration paid for by the swallowing. I know what the term is, but work with me here. Lord Alfred Hayes, the stuff with Piper, and just generally other stuff that he did. oh, it was just playing around, having fun and everything. No, that was fucking harassment back then. That was really bad. And I don't care if it was wrestling, if it was football, if it was baseball, if it was cricket. I don't care if it was goddamn Hollywood. And superstar Billy Graham, you want to talk about a guy that drew a fortune but flamed out because he just couldn't handle the goddamn pressure. Should he have held the championship for longer? Sure. You could argue that Backlund maybe shouldn't have beaten him until Billy Graham held it for, let's see, so he won it in April of 77, and he lost it in February of 88. 78. God damn, if he had held it for 11 years. But he held it for about 10 months. 9.5, 10 months. If he had held it till, say, the summer, say he held it till August, he would have had it for about 16 months by that point. Say he held it till the fall. Say Backlund had won it sometime in October, November. Backlund still would have gotten his big run. He would have gotten his run from later 78 until late 83. So, no, it wouldn't have been the 5+ year, it wouldn't have been the nearly 6-year run, but it would have been 5 years, and that probably would have been more than enough. Not that Backlund wasn't popular, not that Billy Graham wouldn't have, still drawn as the world champion. And he was a big draw. He was starting to fade at that point. His hair was starting to fade because he was 35 by that point. And also the fact that his promos got people in the building. His physical charisma got the people to watch him. He bled a lot, but he wasn't very good in the ring. And honest to God, I don't think it would have really lasted much longer for him with the way he was. Now, he could have held it for 2 years, and Backlund could have won it, and Vince Sr. might have wanted to pivot away from that. But given how Billy Graham's career ended up going and what kind of pills and drugs he was on, according to Dark Side of the Ring, and for some reason, the son of Billy Graham proceeded to comment on my review, and I was very grateful for that. It was odd. But, boy, I felt bad for his kids, because his kids absolutely deserve the fucking world and seem to be doing well for themselves. Whole point is Billy Graham. Yeah, Billy Graham on commentary. And some may confuse Dusty Rhodes with Billy Graham. And yes, if you listen to them in a vacuum, Billy Graham basically, yes, Dusty took a lot from Billy Graham. All this, whatever. Billy Graham, unfortunately, wasn't nearly the worker that Dusty was. Yes, they had that classic series of matches, and I believe 77 and 78. And then that was basically it for Graham. And some of the matches, by the way, are clipped. Now, there's commentary by either Sean Mooney and Lord Alfred Hayes, or Sean Mooney, Lord Alfred Hayes, and Billy Graham. There's like one with Monsoon and Heenan. Heenan sounds like he's talking on a mic from 1965. And then there's one match a little bit later on that was for like some Hidden Gems collection thing. Maybe for the Mr. Perfect DVD, now that I think about it. The one they did, The Life and Times of Mr. Perfect. Where Foley and Michael Cole basically just talk about factoids during the 5-minute match. So, an old Coliseum video release and stuff like that. And Mel Phillips was the ring announcer. Again, it didn't always used to be better. Google Mel Phillips WWF if you want to know what the fuck I'm talking about. Basically, I will say that the guy never deserved to be a goddamn ring announcer. He deserved... Terry Funk, in his debut, ended up, beating him up because he took his stuff where he put his cowboy hat on. And quite frankly, if we had known what Mel Phillips was at the time, he should have gotten beaten within an inch of his goddamn life. Because you don't do that, especially to... I mean, you don't do that in general, but you don't do that to children. Yeah, Mel Phillips. Yeah, fuck him. I'm glad he's dead. He never deserved a fucking job. He should have died penniless and in a ditch. So anyway, Big Boss Man took on Scott Casey. Scott Casey, who worked in Southwest Championship Wrestling for a number of years. He at this point, he was almost 20 years into his career. He did have a run in World Class during, some of the golden period. And then by 87, he was gone. And then I think he worked until late 90, early 91. He worked a little bit, but he got a regular job after 21 years in wrestling. Good on him. I think he's still alive. And Big Boss Man actually left Crockett. He was Big Bubba. He, was a project of Dusty Rhodes. They drew in Pittsburgh, in an indoor arena. That was February of 87, I think, according to what Cornette said. And Then he was Big Bubba. He climbed up on the scaffold. It was the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll in a scaffold match, because 86 was Road Warriors and Midnight Express. That was where Cornette busted both his knees, well, one of his knees in particular, but he probably didn't, the other knee probably didn't feel that great. Jimmy, you fell so fast. Bubba. The Boss Man actually left shortly after that because they got their Starcade payoffs. And Bubba only got $5,000. I think everybody else got 10, if I remember right. So he decided to leave, and I think he was still a bit away from working with Hogan. I think he would work with Hogan in later 88 and early 89, and they would have a great series of matches. Bubba was taking a superplex off the goddamn top of the cage. The big blue steel cage that they had. You know, the one that really looked like it fucking hurt when you hit it. He was getting 10 to 12 grand a week. The match itself wasn't much of anything. Scott Casey was what he was, and Bubba Slam, the Bubba Spike, got the victory in 4 minutes. And then Boss Man proceeded to use his nightstick in inappropriate places. Too bad he didn't beat Mel Phillips with it. I would say that, by the way, if anybody was related to Mel Phillips, I'd say that right to them, because people need to know, if you end up having somebody in your family that's a dirty fucking pervert, and especially if you do nothing, you deserve to be humiliated, just like your now dead ring announcer. What a, God damn it. So by the way, Linda McMahon further proved even back then, rather, that she was just a disgusting human being by rehiring him, but just stay away from children. So she was perfect to work in the current administration. Which, again, if you support the current administration, you're a fucking asshole. Anyway, so Hercules took on Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Hercules really did too many roids. I mean, he was great in Mid-South. He was even fine here, but by 92, it was really getting bad. Brutus was great in a tag team because you could hide the fact that Brutus wasn't great in the ring. Now, he was over, but then again, this was mass hypnosis, and the crowd loved him. The crowd loved him. There were chin locks and a sleeper into a hit into the turnbuckle and a roll-up wanted. Brutus Beefcake, by the way, just, yes, he looked great as a disciple. He cut a lot of weight, and he was in his 40s by that point. But Beefcake got a lot of money and a lot more opportunities than somebody with his limited ability should have gotten. And that's all because he was at times friends with Hogan. The Fabulous Rougeau brothers, Jacques and Raymond, took on the Killer Bees, B. Brian Blair and Jumping Jim Brunzell. The commentary mentioned about the extra weight that Blair and Brunzell had put on. Could Brunzell hit that dropkick? Now, Brunzell and Greg Gagne were a great tag team in the AWA, and that would always build to that dropkick. And Greg would do what he did, which was be Greg, for better or worse, and it was often the latter. And the Rougeaus were really good, but the talk of the extra weight and everything, you would have thought that they were like 300 pounds each. Commentary just kept on about that. There was one where Raymond took a bunch of shots to his thighs. So Jacques was trying to massage his thighs. It was funny. And basically we got the Brunzell drop kick. That was kind of that, and he could hit a good drop kick. Brunzell hasn't wrestled since the late 90s, I think, was the last time. But that got broken up after a 2 count. And then we got a collision where basically Raymond would hit, I think he hit Brunzell while Brunzell had Jacques, or it was vice versa. But bottom line is, Brunzell got pinned. So there you go. And then Bad News Brown, who had knees of a 70-year-old man at this point, or an arthritic old woman, took on Bret Hart. So Bad News Brown won revenge after Bret Hart broke his trophy that he won for the WrestleMania 4 Battle Royal. At least I assume that's the only bill they got for this. They tried Bret as a singles wrestler in 88 and even into 89, but then they had him and Neidhart team up, which was probably smart because Neidhart at this point, personal issues were really starting to take hold. They would really take hold by 91. Bret was really good. Brown was fine as long as he stood upright. He would go for the Ghetto Blaster. No, that's not me being offensive. That was his actual move. It was an enziguri, and he missed that. Bret then hit a crossbody over the top, and then they would battle with roll-ups, and Bad News Brown got a roll-up and got the victory holding the tights. Bret attacked afterwards, and Neidhart helped him. This is when the Hart Foundation were still heels, but they would be faces soon after. The crowd was really starting to take to Bret. And then the Honky Tonk Man, Jimmy Hart, and Mean Gene Okerlund did a little interview thing there, and then Hacksaw Jim Duggan was fresh off of his the Turnpike incident with Iron Sheik. Look it up, folks. He had wrestled on the Paul Bosch retirement show, won the Royal Rumble earlier that year, the first ever Royal Rumble. Well, actually, technically, it was labeled as the first Royal Rumble, but it was only 20 men. Still, he eliminated the one-man gang, who would soon come back as Hakeem. I think that Vince McMahon hated big people. I really do. So, yeah, this was an IC title match. It didn't really amount to much because Honky Tonk Man, bless him, he made a lot of money with that gimmick, but he was not very good. And Jimmy interfered and caused a DQ. Jimmy got thumped by the guitar when it looked like they were going to do something. Jimmy, I have no idea how Jimmy Hart, took all those bumps for so many goddamn years and still looks basically the same. He's 80, 81 years old now and is in great shape. Hacksaw then smashed a guitar with his massive piece of wood. That's not a euphemism. So we have the Powers of Pain. We have Barbarian and the Warlord taking on the Bolsheviks. Yeah, Boris Zukov and Nikolai Volkov. The Powers of Pain had left Crockett earlier in the year, I believe, if I remember right, because Dusty had the bright idea to put the Powers of Pain, two big meatheads, against the Road Warriors, who were two big meatheads, in a scaffold match. Fuck you. I ain't taking those bumps, they said, and yeah, they left. You kind of can't blame them. And a solid ass of muscle. I know what it said, but it's just funnier to think that Billy Graham might have said a solid ass of muscle, considering that he always got roids jammed at his ass because he was an idiot. And quite frankly, all the injuries that he incurred were kind of his fault with all the shit that he did to himself. Seeing Barbarian and Warlord as faces was weird, but then they would do a double turn at Survivor Series because Demolition were managed by Mr. Fuji. And then they would do a big old 10-man thing, 10-team thing, if I remember right. I think that was the same one where it was the last time the Bulldogs were on the show, shortly after the Rougeau incident, where Dynamite got everything he deserved, and quite frankly deserved to be rocked a lot more. More on him in a bit. But we got a power slam, and then we got a headbutt off the top, and Barbarian covered 2/3 of the ring to hit that goddamn diving headbutt. That was impressive. Boris Zukov got pinned for what he was worth, which wasn't much at this point. Lanny Poffo used to throw frisbees. He used to throw frisbees into the crowd. Lanny Poffo was an odd one. Very odd. Still strange, he did commentary on a New Japan show before the pandemic, but it was weird. Jim Neidhart took on Lanny Poffo. I wrote down why. I mean, at least it was quick. Lanny was not the genius yet. He was a favor hire for Randy Savage because, they were brothers. I really wish Randy Savage was able to be inducted in the Hall of Fame while he was still alive. And I know the reason was the family and stuff like that, but still. I just wish he could have gotten inducted while he was alive. A power slam won it. Neidhart, bless him, rest in peace, Jim Neidhart. Randy Savage with Elizabeth took on Ted DiBiase with Virgil. Ted DiBiase did not try to scam anybody in the crowd, at least, like he did the people of Mississippi, allegedly. I don't really buy, by the way, that he wasn't involved in that somewhat, because I don't think his sons would just do that without Ted, using whatever fame he had for it, but that's another story for another day. It's a WWF title match, and this is at least where Hogan didn't interfere, but they couldn't really give Randy a big old clean thing. I mean, they gave him something. And it actually would play into them colliding again at SummerSlam just under a month. Because SummerSlam 88, the first ever SummerSlam, was about a month away. I think it was like the very end of August. Savage was really, really good. Savage should have held that title for 2 years, in my personal opinion. And I know why they gave it back to Hogan. I mean, I'm not saying Hogan wasn't a draw at that point, but I really feel that Savage deserved to hold it for longer than a year. Because he held it for like 373 days because of how the dates of WrestleMania worked out. And both were so good. Because Ted was very good at this point. Like, he was good at scamming people, allegedly. The crowd was very into this. Savage sold his right knee. And they, used good psychology. Ted was a great heel. Virgil ended up hitting Savage with a chair while the referee didn't see it. But then soon after, Savage got a quick one, got a roll-up 1, 2, 3. And a post-match attack where Ted DiBiase steals the WWF Championship, or at least tries to, and then Savage throws a chair in, and then Ted and Virgil take a powder. And there you are. So he celebrates with Elizabeth afterwards. That's not a euphemism. That's not sick. I run a clean show. And then we talk about Mr. Perfect and the Red Rooster. And Foley had talked about how both these men were supposed to have, were in line for the Mr. Perfect gimmick. Terry Taylor was a very good worker. He is also a very good stooge. And he, being the Red Rooster, was stupid. He was never going to recover from it. When he was terrific, Terry Taylor, when he came back in 92, and he was only there till like 93, and then he went back to WCW. Yeah, because he bounced around a lot. Nobody was going to forget that. And here's the thing. Terry, for all his faults, and being a friend with Vince Russo would be one of them, was very good in the ring. He would hit that 5-arm. He was Terrence Taylor when he was part of the York Foundation. That short-lived deal. They had a great theme this week on Dallas. But Mr. Perfect, I mean, he was Kurt Hennig at this point. Because he had just, if I remember right, like Super Clash 2 was Super Clash 2 was May of 87. He beat Bockwinkel. He lost the AWA title to Lawler like May or June of 88 and was bound for WWF. So he wasn't even Mr. Perfect at this point. He still had the tights on, not the singlet like he would. And he would end up hitting a lariat variation, or like a forearm. It wasn't a 5-arm, which was, a flying forearm that Terry would hit. But, Mr. Perfect got the victory. And, by the way that it's listed on Pro Wrestling Wiki, or Pro Wrestling Wikipedia, they actually had Randy Savage and Ted DiBiase at the top. But because of the Coliseum video release, they had this. So, actually, if I remember right, they actually probably had it here, and then we're going to present the rest, and we're going to have like a double main event deal. Rick Rude then took on Jake Roberts, which I will say this was at least better than what they had at WrestleMania 4, if I recall correctly. That was a 15-minute match that ended up being kind of boring. This had at least a hot start and had some good moments. It did also have a chin lock and face lock that went about 4 fucking minutes, which is ridiculous. And Rick was very good at this point. Jake actually took a few bumps, which surprised me. And Jake has admitted to a lot of the stuff he did. That doesn't excuse it, but at least he finally admitted. I mean, granted, some of the stuff with him seems to be at work, but whatever, it is what it is. He got a lot of stuff from Grizzly. Thankfully not that, but he got a lot of the line from Grizzly. There was a nice ref bump where Rude got the referee in the way, so when, Jake hits the DDT, Rude's out. But you can't do anything. And that's the thing. The DDT was actually a protective finish at one point. It was actually a finish at one point. And Jake hit it the best. Raven, I did like how Arn would hit it, but I thought Raven hitting the even flow was about as close as you could get. I feel Jake Roberts did the best DDT, my personal opinion. It's like how I feel Diamond Cutter's better in the RKO. They battle outside, double count out. And then Jake got his snake out, and it was called a Python necktie. I usually have to pay extra for that. I will not speak further. But there we are. A pretty good match, all honesty. There were some good matches on the show, but yeah. King Haku took on Sam Houston. Oh boy, back to the Roberts family. Or the Smith family. Sam Houston, yes, related to Jake Roberts. Believe it or not. Say, King Haku, this is when he was given the crown after Harley Race had suffered the abdominal injury, sternum injury, I forget what. Harley Race, by the way, you want to talk about a complicated legacy. Google how he treated a lot of women. Tremendous wrestler, very hard-hitting, very tough. Not a good guy to be married to. So, anyway, Sam, he will eat you alive, and he did. He got a kick, he got a splash. It was about 5 minutes, and Haku won. Ultimate Warrior against Bobby Heenan in a weasel suit match. Remember when Ultimate Warrior made fun of Bobby Heenan's cancer and said he had a colostomy bag when he really didn't, and called him Booby Heenan and all this stuff, and Ultimate Warrior tried to act all, prim and proper and righteous and everything, despite the fact that Bobby Heenan meant more to professional wrestling than Ultimate Warrior ever did. And Ultimate Warrior did draw a lot of money, and again, was very, very inspirational to a lot of children, and I was 6 years old when I first saw him. They showed him on a few tapings. I mean, really, I got to see him in full force SummerSlam 88 because a buddy of mine had a relative that taped the shows, and I was able to watch that. But my goddamn goodness, Ultimate Warrior is a piece of shit. And if that bothers people, I don't care. Because you can be a tremendous goddamn talent, or at least a talent that drew a lot of money. You can be a cartoon character and somebody that did sell a lot of fucking tickets. But in all honesty, tell me that all the stuff that Ultimate Warrior said about Martin Luther King, about the Hurricane Katrina victims, about Davey Boy Smith, about Bobby Heenan's cancer, you try to defend that shit to me. Please. You're a fucking idiot if you try, but whatever. So anyway, a sleeper won it, and then Heenan did weasel suit comedy. At least it was better than working with Greg Gagne, because at least Ultimate Warrior had physical charisma. Greg Gagne, I mean, I'm sorry, but just not only a guy that was just bland, but Mike Graham had better personality than Greg Gagne. And that's saying something. But yeah, Ultimate Warrior making fun of Bobby Heenan's cancer. Fuck him. Glad he's dead. Dana should have joined him. Demolition, Axe and Smash. This is before Bryan Adams. No, not the Summer of 69 guy, but Bryan Adams, Crush, came along. Mr. Fuji was in their corner. And the British Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith, I'm Fooked, Brett, I'm Fooked, and noted wife abuser Dynamite Kid. I'm glad Dynamite suffered so much in the last 20-something years of his life. Friggin' shove your pregnant wife in a closet and treat her badly and everything and do that. That's a mother of your children. Dynamite. Little short man complex. Guy deserved every bit of ridicule and abuse that he got. And I don't care. Great talent. But, maybe Benoit really did learn a lot from him. A little too much. So, interesting matchup, to be perfectly honest. This is when the Bulldogs are going to be on their way out. I don't know if the Rougeau... No, I don't think the Rougeau incident happened yet, because they faced off at SummerSlam in a 20-minute Broadway, and then sometime after that, the Jacques and Dynamite stuff really blew up. Axe and Smash did target the back of Dynamite Kid, because Dynamite suffered... It was against Morocco and Murdoch. Morocco, it was Morocco and Murdoch, or Morocco and Bob, I think it was Bob Orton Jr. actually. And it was Hamilton, Ontario, I think, or somewhere in Ohio. It was somewhere in that area. Dynamite went to do a simple, and they showed on the Dark Side of the Ring. Went to a simple, step over, and it was time for his back to go. Now that was 86. If you remember at WrestleMania 2, they did the sacrifice thing that Greg Valentine had probably given them from working with the Andersons, seeing the Andersons, Ole versus everyone Anderson. And that's a little dig for anybody that is still watching at this point. Like, one person's going to laugh at that. And Gene Anderson. And they did the thing where Dynamite actually went to the floor. Now, the thing is, he was up on the ropes, head-on-head collision. Not like what Adrian Adonis had, and right to the floor. And that's the thing. It was on the cement floor. The cameraman missed it. They could have had that, oh shit, boom, but they missed it. And that's what fucked his back up, and then his back snapped, basically. He had to have vertebrae. I don't know if they were fused or just some were removed or some were, sheared or whatever it was. He had to drop the tag titles. And, yeah, that was pretty much it. So Dynamite's full-time career is pretty much done. Well, that was unexpected. Good old allergies. Isn't it great? Tell you, Axe and Smash target the back. Fuji took a bump, which was really sad to see at that point because Fuji just couldn't do anything. I mean, I think he actually could be at a Mania 5, but still, that being said. A cane shot won it, so Axe and Smash retained the tag titles. And then Dino Bravo against Ken Patera. Ken was about done at this point because he'd been wrestling for a while. And yes, after the McDonald's incident, and it was what it was. Side Suplex won it. It was short, I'll say that much. And Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant Steel Cage match, escape only. Seeing Andre at this point was really sad. Because Andre was clearly defeated, clearly broken down. He did what he could. Bobby Heenan was in his corner. It was what the fans came to see. And it was kind of poetic almost. Because Hogan and Andre had a match in Shea Stadium in 1980. Where Hogan had slammed Andre, but they forgot about all that. And Andre had never been slammed and all that stuff. Andre had taken plenty of slams. Harley Race slammed him on the outside. Kamala slammed him. But the whole point is that they had done, the build to Mania 3. They had done the return of Andre the Giant at Survivor Series 87. And then they had the contract signing at the Royal Rumble 88. They had the big event, or was it the big event? The main event. I think it was called the main event, where 33 million people watched, and that was a big goddamn deal. And that was where they had both Hebners, because I believe, if I remember right, Earl Hebner had actually left Crockett and gotten over there. Just decided to leave. And it's like, how much they pay for the plastic surgery, Mean Gene, so all that. And again, I stand by everything I said about Hogan. I'm not going to, delineate it here and expand upon it here. But the guy, the character, hugely inspirational and one of the biggest draws. Truly, one of the biggest draws. Generations upon generations of fans were appreciative of what Hogan said. And, say your prayers, take your vitamins, believe in yourself. But Terry Bollea, the man himself, was not a good guy. And no amount of giving into religion and trying to be that way is going to justify it. So, Hogan was bleeding. Andre couldn't really bump too much, but took the leg drop. Heenan came in. And then the international object, if this was a Ted Turner production, got used on Andre. He got tied up in the ropes. And then Heenan got thrown into the cage. And Hulk actually was safe with Heenan, unlike Ultimate Warrior. And then Hogan climbed out and won. And then we had Billy Graham, what was left of him, Sean Mooney trying to carry this whole thing. And Lord Alfred Hayes probably wondering who he could whip his dick out in front of and joke around with him like he did with Roddy Piper. Look it up, folks. So yeah, that is WrestleFest. That went a lot longer than I expected, but I had a lot of jokes to say. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would you like to see more reviews of the Coliseum video stuff that they've done? Would you like to see that? Let me know. Like, share, subscribe. Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Rentlin, and until we WrestleFest again, happy trails to you.